All right, let's go ahead and kick things off. Thank you everyone for coming to our virtual hangout today with TimeChi and Aero Electronics. We're going to start with a fireside chat and then finish with an AMA. So please use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen to ask a question and let us know who your question is for. Just a little housekeeping note here. We're here to have a positive kind of open discussion. So please no kind of negative comments. If you have any customer support questions, feel free to ask them, but we'll follow up with you directly after the hangout individually so we can get your questions answered. Awesome. All right. With that, this talking, by the way, is Brittany Nelson, Partnerships Manager at Indiegogo. And I am very excited to introduce Jordan Halbleib, Entrepreneur Success Coordinator at Aero, Jeff Brown, Applications Engineer at Aero, and Sean Greenhalgh, CEO and co-founder of TimeChi. We're here to have a really awesome conversation, kind of learn more about TimeChi's entrepreneur experience, launching on Indiegogo and manufacturing. So with that, I will pass it off to Jordan. You can do a quick intro and we'll get started.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in today. We're super excited that you're joining us. Like Brittany said, my name is Jordan and I work for Aero Electronics, specifically with the Aero certification program, which we can get to later on in the webinar. But yeah, I would love to get started and talk to Sean a little bit, the CEO of TimeChi. Sean, thanks again for joining us this morning. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm sure we'd all love to hear a little bit about your idea and how you came up with it.
Yeah, so TimeChi was something that I kind of made almost for myself because I realized that like productivity and time management is something that's so important for everyone, but it's something that I kind of struggled with. I actually came up with the idea for TimeChi while working on a different startup, but realized that I was working in Australia's first WeWork at the time, and was spending way too much time being tapped on the shoulder, being interrupted, or even kind of interrupting myself by spending way too much time on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, things like that. So I suddenly got a shock realization when I got the WeWork bill in my email and said, wow, this is expensive, and this is my own money that I'm kind of spending every time I'm like on Facebook. And I was like, wow, this is the most expensive Facebook time that I'm spending. So I went back to a time management philosophy that I started back in university days called the Pomodoro method, where you spend 25 minutes of focused work and then 5 minutes of break. And then you do a couple of those ones and you then take a long break. The nice thing is it splits your day up into very big, very short kind of like sessions of deep work. And then you get a little reward at the end of it. And I was actually, there was previously a hardware company that I was working on at the time. And I kind of decided to make myself a little hardware timer that sat on my desk, literally just a few LEDs, a little screen, and a bare circuit board. And when I was using that, I would realize that it was helping me a lot to keep focused, especially because I supercharged the Pomodoro method for the 21st century by not only helping me keep time, but also blocking me from going to websites like Facebook, Twitter, and also muting my phone so that I could actually get that deep work done. But because I was working at a WeWork at the time, it meant that people kind of came up to me, looked at it and said like, hey, what's that? And when I explained what it does, they said like, hey, I could do with one of those. Can you make me one and I'll pay you? And I was like, I guess I could. And enough people came up to me and asked me the same question. It's like, hey, what's that? Can I buy one? That I kind of realized, hey, maybe I'm not the only person in the world who's got a problem with trying to keep focus and getting deep work done. So we pivoted the company, changed it around and said like, let's build this. And that's how we came up with the idea for TimeChi.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I get to talk to entrepreneurs all the time, and some of those challenges that you were touching on are very common with startups and entrepreneurship. So you're definitely not alone. And with this project, where did you see gaps in your process that you knew you needed support from like outside partners?
Yeah, when we started TimeChi, like it was probably getting the hardware side of things and getting advice, because one of the biggest problems was we were a bunch of mostly software engineers, but my co-founder is also a mechatronics engineer, so he knew a lot about electronics and stuff. But none of us really knew that much about mass manufacture and getting that sort of stuff done, which is where we leaned on when we found out that Arrow was doing a partnership with Indiegogo. At the time, Arrow was already one of our main suppliers. We used to get lots of parts and components from the United States. In fact, I recall like looking at it going like, wow, this is great. It's free shipping. It's from the United States. And at the time it was taking about 3 days to deliver. A little bit longer now, thanks to the pandemic, but we were already using Arrow. And when we found out that there was a partnership between Arrow and Indiegogo, and we were already considering going crowdfunding, we said, hey, let's jump onto this. And that's how we got in touch with Arrow, and you assigned us a person to help us do our project, reviewed everything through, and just been kind of like emailing back and forth, getting advice on not only the best way to do things, but like, you know, what's the best component for this one? Like, you know, what suggestions do you have? And now that we're getting to mass production, the credits for like the BOM and stuff like that has helped us a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, just one more question about the early stages. I know that you have a demo with you or a live product with you now. I'm sure people would love to see it. But how did you bring your product to life? What were like those basic steps that you went through?
A lot of it was kind of like trying to figure out how to get this whole idea of startups and doing the MVP in the hardware space. And that was probably one of the big things, because I used to get very angry when people used to go, oh, you're doing a hardware startup? Well, hardware is hard. It's like, if I honestly never heard that again in my entire life, I'd be a very happy man. But like, you know, it was one of those things where I kind of decided, hey, there must be a way to get this done faster, quicker, kind of like be able to iterate and things like that. And in the early days, we used to get circuit boards and stuff made up in China, kind of, you know, pick and place it ourselves. That allowed us to do things quite quickly. We did a lot of 3D printing. That was an amazing thing. Like 3D printing is, it's just an absolute godsend when trying to do design. So we managed to make quick designs, send them out to manufacture, 3D print the cases, be able to 3D print different modifications and stuff like on the same day, hand it out to people and get real live feedback from people who are potential customers, and iterate until we got something that we felt that we could make more of them and then start getting more feedback. So we kind of went into the whole lean startup methodology, but managed to bring that into the hardware world.
Okay, very cool. And I'm getting some questions from our live chat coming in now. I just wanted to throw out there real quick for some of our late audience members. Would you mind just giving us another overview of what TimeChi actually is and how the product works and its purpose?
Yeah, so hang on, let me switch off the virtual background because it kind of blocks things in front of me, just so that it shows better. So this is TimeChi. It's a hardware and software solution and a smart timer for your productivity. We kind of call it a Fitbit for your productivity because it's almost like a coach to help you be more productive. So in its essence, this is a Wi-Fi connected smart timer with an app in the background that goes on your phone and computer, so that when you want to start focusing, you give it a nice solid press. We decided to put a nice physical click in it because it gives you that nice click and endorphin loop. Like, you know, it's what we call the dopamine feedback reflex. It's the idea that when you have kind of like that thing, when you click something, when you touch something that you like, when you get that little reward. I know we were having a chat about like, you know, dogs and stuff earlier. It's like one of the strongest things that you can do for dogs is clicker training. And that helps you make good habits. But what I did was I activated, and this is going quickly so that it's nice for demoing, but it started a 25-minute focus session. So in the background, it connected to an app on my phone and computer, and actually muted them and put them on Do Not Disturb. It also blocks me from going to websites like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, things like that, things that would normally steal your focus. And it means that you get deep work done. But it also creates a virtual quiet space. So if you're in an office or have people around you, when I'm working at home, it's my wife, thanks to all the work from home. it actually acts as a nice big traffic light. So it not only tells people that you're busy, but it also tells them when they can come back. So it works better than just a do not disturb sign or headphones on, which never really works because people decide to interrupt you because it's like you could be working for 5 minutes or 5 hours. So they just interrupt you straight away. But we also keep statistics and metrics in the background so that you can see how many focus sessions you've done, how many breaks you've had to take, how many times you've had to break a focus session. And it helps kind of train you to be better at your productivity and better at your time management. And you can also have a look back into it and see, like, you know, how long your longest focus session was, if you've gone over time, so that you can find out if 25 minutes is good for you or if you need to shorten it or lengthen it. But we want to be able to be very open with the statistics that you give us and be able to start using them to predict what is your perfect focus cycle and break time to get maximum productivity and the best way to get your work done.
That is such a unique and amazing project. I have never seen anything like that, and I can tell you firsthand, I would definitely benefit from something like that. So I can't wait. I can't wait to get one.
Yeah,
but on the phone with
counting down, so it's going to go straight into break mode now. So this one's counting quite quickly, as you can see, which is just good for demo purposes. And this is the matte black edition that everybody was asking for because they wanted it. It was one of the things we were learning from the Indiegogo campaign, is trying to create nice stretch goals. And we realized that like we created a community in the background where people were keeping on, like, you know, giving us feedback about what features and what things they wanted in the product, which kind of helped us with product development, but also helped us kind of choose our stretch goals, because making things in one color is easy, but it becomes a little bit more complicated when you start adding multiple editions of things. But this, I think our biggest request was, we want to see the matte black edition. We want to see the matte black edition. And we actually managed to unlock that stretch goal, which was absolutely fantastic. And it means that, you know, the option of the limited edition matte black edition became something that we're creating for Indiegogo backers.
That's great. Yeah, and black goes with everything, so there's no excuse not to have one in the house.
Yeah, it's like, you know, the little black dress. It's like it's the perfect thing for every occasion.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And on the call with us today, everyone, I wanted to introduce Jeff real quick. Actually, I'll let him do his own introduction, and then I have a couple of questions for him.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Brown, and I work on the Aero Certification Project program as a applications engineer.
Thanks, Jeff. So happy you're here as well. So Jeff, just working with TimeChi and these other entrepreneurs, what are some of the things that Aero can do to help entrepreneurs like TimeChi?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of what Sean would mention earlier, a big part of what we like to help out with is that hardware pieces. You know, a lot of times selecting components can be kind of daunting, even if you are from an electronics background, because there's so many out there. And the other issue that comes up is sometimes you select, you know, some components, but there's a whole logistics piece that goes into that as well. So, you know, sometimes it's making sure that you'll have those components for manufacturing. You know, coming up on a big run, you know, that's a production run, I should say. That's something that you're really cognizant about, making sure, hey, are all my parts, you know, at the manufacturing plant? Are they ready to go? That's a big part of what Aero can help with, as well as, you know, what we like to do is give the knowledge and tools for entrepreneurs to just kind of keep moving forward and pushing their projects.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. That thing, I think what I really liked what Jeff says, like pushing projects forward. It's so easy to get off track and frustrated with projects. So I think that's what our engineers come in. They kind of bridge that gap between like where you are and where you want to be, give you that second set of eyes just to look over your project, give you their recommendations. It's amazing.
Oh, one thing I think Jeff played down there is like one of the biggest things when getting into mass manufacture, which was even a shock to me, was kind of managing things and choosing components, because you're not only talking about if the companies have stock levels and making sure they're there on time, but the biggest kind of like slap that we managed to find along the way was products when they become like two things about like individual components there. Not for new designs, not recommended for new designs was a new term that I learned. And then end of life, which is a scary one. Oh my God, like, you know, we chose, like, before we got in touch with Aero, we chose a a small thing that's just a power regulator that, you know, just turns your 5-volt USB into the 3.3 volts that we had. And because at the time we weren't working with Arrow and just kind of like choosing our own components, we chose one that was actually end of life, which meant like when we went for our second beta production run to a few amount of customers, we actually had to search high and low to be able to get the part. And that was just, it was an absolutely pain in the neck. And that was just for like getting 50, 60 units together, let alone if we tried to do it for our mass manufacture run where we've got over 2,000 units to try and fulfill.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think, you know, that's a big thing, that when you're really in deep with the electronics, the design, the software, a lot of times these other parts of the process towards manufacturing and, you know, getting it in the market can get overlooked. But like you mentioned, things like that you learn real quickly, and that's why we like to help out. We'd rather you learn from us than learn from a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, it kind of makes me wish we were in touch when we, like, you know, had the first bomb together, because you probably would have like pointed out and said, hey, this component is end of life. You might not want to, like, you know, start off with trying to doing your run with that one, because you'll face problems in the future, which we did.
Yeah.
And it was something we, as you said, learned very, very quickly.
Yeah, and we like to try to remove that, but you're right, and that's kind of what we really are looking for, is components, like you said, obsolete parts, end of life parts. You know, there's a plethora of different things that can go, you know, that can happen, and that's something that we, you know, we're experts in. So we maintain and make sure that you guys or any entrepreneur will know, hey, that part, you know, let's find an alternative for that part, so we can actually source it when it comes time to manufacture. But absolutely, I'm glad to hear that you learned quickly, because sometimes it's not such a happy ending when people have selected components, they go to manufacture, can't get it done. So we want to remove all those sad stories.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Well, you guys, actually that leads us right into our next question. Great segue into it. Sean, Jeff, what are some of the common mistakes, Jeff, that you see entrepreneurs make as they're working through their developmental process? And Sean, feel free, like what mistakes do you think you've made through it as well?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the things that I see most often are just because oftentimes entrepreneurs maybe are newer to the product development and more to the manufacturing of electronics. That's where the mistakes, I think, are. Planning ahead of time. Obviously, you're in it deep with your design, and it takes a lot of your effort and your brain power, but, you know, making sure that you are looking forward towards that production. Like we've mentioned, if sourcing parts, the logistics, that's a huge portion. And, you know, even selecting components that maybe aren't end of life, but, you know, thinking forward for maybe the next version of your device. And so you don't necessarily have to do a full redesign for version 2. That's another thing I think I see most often, but probably the most common mistake is not seeing how much effort the project management for selecting, sourcing components and getting them ready for production.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we kind of learned by trial by fire. I mean, it's when in the early days when we started TimeChi, we're actually based in Sydney, Australia, where I guess it's in its infancy for both, like, you know, startups and especially hardware startups, to the fact that I kind of realized that I spend a lot of time meeting a lot of other startups. I'm also a co-director of a community called Startup Grind, which is an international community for startups. But because of that, I kept on meeting other startups that said, hey, you're a hardware startup, we are too. And I started getting to the point where I was thinking, no, you lie, and I'm going to prove it. So I actually started a community called the Australian Hardware Startups, or what we call AusHard, just, you know, kind of like fun name. And it was a place where suddenly we created this community that's now over 1,000 members strong, and shared a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about not only prototyping and design, but also getting to mass manufacture. And I realized that was that was a very uphill battle to create a whole community to kind of like be able to find out the information that I needed and wanted. But it was something that I did because in the early days, I didn't know where to go to kind of like, find the sort of help. And this is definitely something which I should have done, like met you guys earlier and like, helped lean on you. I mean, I'm not gonna put down the fact that Ozhard is an amazing community. I'm glad that I created it, but it's good to find experts and expertise in the area of manufacturing, because if you think that you can make one, you can make 10, but the moment where you go into like 100 units of something, it suddenly changes in scale of like what you need to do and what you need to look out for. And then when you go to 1,000 for scale, and then when you go to 10,000, it's like all sorts of different things, because there's just so many kind of like different steps that you go. Like, when you're making 100 of something, it's like, okay, you go through your manufacturer, you go like, through your source, you source your own components, those sorts of things. But when you make 1,000 of something, then you start bringing in your contract manufacturer, and then, you get them to try and help you with sourcing. When you get to 10,000, it's like, okay, now you go to the direct manufacturer for lots of different parts and stuff like that. And this is all stuff that, I learned along the way. And it's really daunting, I think, is the biggest thing. And it's quite surprising, like how complicated things become when you start talking about more numbers. And I think that's just something which nobody really like, comprehends unless you've been in the field of like mass manufacture for a long time. Then it's just something that it's always good to have mentor, like, somebody on call to be able to have expertise in helping you out.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I love how you mentioned like the community. I think that's huge. I can't tell you how many people I talk to on a weekly basis that are like, oh, I heard about this program through another project that went through the program. And I'm like, oh, that's great. How did you hear about them? Like, oh, we're in this chat room, and this guy was in Helsinki and this other guy was in the UK. So it's just amazing like how small of a world we're actually in. How much the certification program is reaching the world. So it's awesome. I love how you guys are just kind of networking and getting to know each other in that space. It's really cool. Yeah, so Jeff, just to clarify some questions for some of our viewers, when your team meets with entrepreneurs like TimeChi, what's the normal process for obtaining this certification badge?
Yeah, so normally we like to get kind of information, obviously signing up, through the website. And then, we'll either, email back. Jordan, I believe you're kind of the first line, and, talking back with customers. But once it gets to, to myself, at that point, it's usually reading over any of the documentation, bill of materials, anything that the customer, entrepreneur already has, and really figuring out their needs. Because, people might think, oh, entrepreneurs, they're all the same. They're all in the same boat. And it's like, absolutely not, completely different projects, how far along they are. That all kind of goes into play on how we can best help. So again, we like to put that knowledge and the tools in the hands of the entrepreneur. So, if it's something they're asking about manufacturing and they have questions about, the manufacturing process, we might have a call and just start talking through that manufacturing process. But typically it starts with, the documentation that you have, block diagram, bill of materials, and then we progress through that, having a call, getting more about, more detailed about the project, where the issues might lie, if they do have an end of life part, anything like that, or they have questions about selecting a component, that's, that would be the next step. And then kind of that, that feasibility for manufacturing, that's kind of that last step that we're saying, all right, that is feasible for manufacturing, and then we go on with the certification badge.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And what's so great about the certification program is that we're able to help entrepreneurs at any stage that they're in, from ideation all the way through production, and being able to like cater to the needs of that specific entrepreneur. And we could be doing a bunch of marketing one day with this guy, and then doing a bunch of component selection support for another. So it's really cool to just like adapt to that specific entrepreneur.
Yeah, I remember one of the things was when we ended up joining the Arrow certification program, was we did a couple of different video calls. I think I did the first one with you, Jordan, before being passed to somebody who is in a kind of more suitable time zone, because for those of you who don't know, I'm actually based in Hong Kong at the moment to kick off manufacturing, keeping my fingers crossed that they open the border between Shenzhen, where our manufacturers are, and Hong Kong at the moment, because, you know, COVID-19 kind of moved us about, and it's better to be working from here, where it's like, you know, within 1 day shipping. Even express shipping to Australia is taking more and more time. But like, I remember when we first got in touch with Arrow and sent through our BOM, our designs and everything like that to one of your colleagues, they looked everything through, and then they asked like lots of questions about, and it's like, okay, your component list looks fine. I would maybe suggest, like, you know, some poly fuses and stuff like that to, like, you know, be a little bit more ESD safe and stuff, so that you can get ready for certification. But they already said to me, it's like, you're actually a lot further along than lots of companies who like at the point when they get in touch with us. And to me, that's kind of like, oh God, I should have gotten in touch with you much earlier, rather than kind of like the point there. I mean, it was a very quick turnaround when we got like, hey, yep, we approve it, and you get, you know, you can get the badge. I was like, wow. It's like all the times, all the Google searches, all the, like, you know, searching high and low for the answer to something. I should have come earlier. It's it's kind of like that. That's the point that we were at. It's, you know, we wanted to get, one part of things was the fact that, like, you know, the Arrow certification helps kind of tell people that, yep, somebody else, a third party, has actually certified and said, like, this project actually has the legs to go to mass manufacture. They've sorted out their, like, you know, their designs. They've sorted out their materials. We're not just kind of like something that somebody made out of clay and then decided to say, hey, like, you know, we're going to sell this and like sell you the world, but that doesn't really exist. But, you know, the other side of things is, like, you know, it's probably strongly the advice and everything that we get. But also on top of that is the fact that I think the single most expensive thing we did during our campaign was doing marketing and advertising. And, like, you know, you helped us out a lot by getting, you know, helping share your channels with us to be able to promote TimeChi to, like, a wider audience. And it means, like, anybody who can help you do that is just, you know, worth their weight in gold, considering that the amount of money that Facebook and, you know, the Facebook properties like Instagram and stuff, and like, and Google, it's like, it's, I think people don't realize that, you know, you spend like maybe about half your campaign funds on, like, you know, advertising to get out there. I think people say, like, it's about, you know, you get about a $10 for every $1 you get back, but that's kind of like the best campaigns. We managed to do a fair amount, like, you know, fairly good, but, like, you know, definitely not that one. But man, advertising is expensive. And, you know, coming from being an engineer and being a development background, it's like, kind of seeing how much people spend on that, it's like, wow, anybody who can help you with that is just, you know, amazing.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, marketing alone can be crazy expensive, and a lot of the entrepreneurs I do talk to spend a good chunk of their money on the advertising. So it's Arrow's marketing options and marketing support that we have, I'm glad was beneficial for you. I know we reach a ton of different audiences, so anything we can do to help, you know, spread the word and bring you guys to light a little more. That's great. Thank you. Sean, excuse me, just to kind of go through your Indiegogo plan and kind of that process with that. Why did you choose crowdfunding, and more specifically, why did you choose Indiegogo?
Yeah, so the crowdfunding kind of seems to be and is almost the best sort of way to get your product to market. If you're doing a consumer or B2C product, like, you know, business consumer, then crowdfunding is almost the de facto and the best way to get it to market. When you're trying to produce something that's a physical product, it doesn't even have to be electronics. It's got a lot of like overheads and kind of like startup costs. Typically, this is stuff like getting all of your tooling ready, all of the trips to your mass manufacturer and stuff, which means that this is all money that you kind of like need it up at the front to be able to manufacture. And it's probably the biggest risk that you can take is the fact that, you know, you'd end up paying maybe about $20,000 just to create metal molds to create your product. And the truth is, like, you know, talking about a little earlier on, talking about the lean methodology and like talking about trying to be very capital efficient, is the fact that you try and find that there's demand before you actually put down the money and start, like, you know, spending a lot of money to try and get something manufactured. Because the worst situation you'd ever want to be in is, you know, you put $20,000 into starting to manufacture a product that nobody ends up buying. So what Indiegogo helps us do in crowdfunding in general is the fact that it allows you to test the market, to be able to kind of like find out demand, to be able to get people to place money down on a prototype or even an idea before you even put down your first dollars into getting mass manufacturing started. And that's the reason why we chose to go through the whole crowdfunding process. The fact is that you get to test demand, you get to do marketing, you get to get money up front so that you can actually use that money to be able to fulfill your orders. And then from that point onwards, if you decide to keep going to market like we are, then it means that you've helped de-risk all of that stuff. And the reason why we chose Indiegogo was in the early days, we were actually part of an accelerator program that visited San Francisco. So we decided, hey, let's go and visit the Indiegogo offices, and met the team from Indiegogo, and they were telling us all about all the hardware projects and stuff that they have on their site. But probably one of the biggest reasons why we chose them, apart from kind of the in-demand store where we are currently, is the fact that post campaign, which is like a month-long campaign, and then all the way up to the day we ship our first item, it gives you the opportunity to have almost an e-commerce store that you can still sell your product to, as a pre-sale to customers. That was probably one of the big reasons why we chose Indiegogo. But the other side of things is the fact that the partnership that they have with you guys kind of made us feel that they were a little bit more involved with hardware startups. And we were like, well, if Arrow's partnering with them and we like Arrow sends us a pack of resistors that in 3 days from the United States. And I still to this day kind of look going I'm ordering $10 worth of resistors and you're giving it free shipping to Australia. It's like, you're sending this stuff faster than if we bought this here in Australia. And I just kind of felt like, wow, it's like if Arrow's working with them, then if it's good enough for Arrow, it's good enough for us.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, we try to do whatever we can to help our entrepreneurs and our customers in general. But yeah, we hear a lot of really great success stories from Indiegogo. Obviously, crowdfunding can be kind of a hard thing to grasp and to really understand, but it sounds like you guys had a very successful run. You did it right. Can you tell us a little bit about that success and use success as you want? Is it by how much money you raised, by how many backers you got from it? What was your success story with Indiegogo?
Yeah, it's kind of thinking very, very top line for us. Success for us is to get our product into market and to kind of share the idea of something that we created for the world that helps us internally in the team be focused and productive and manage time. Because it's kind of a scary thought when you think that time is literally the only thing that you never get back. And it means that if people are spending their time wasting time on social media, wasting time not doing work, it takes it away from being able to do the things that people really love. And it's something that we wanted to share with the world. For us, it was making sure that we get the product out there, making sure that we get the following that we want. We want to create kind of rather than just make a product, it's make a movement about people who are more literate about their time. I mean, Fitbit did it for people's fitness. We want to make sure that it's done the same way for your focus and productivity. And probably the single biggest success story around all of this was actually the community that we created. In the early days, we created the Timecheat VIPs group and managed to find lots of like-minded individuals who I absolutely love to bits, that make the group so good that not only gave us feedback about ideas, but we were floating hey, what is the biggest feature that you guys want? And it's kind of this self-fulfilling brilliant thing, the fact that as when you're working on your startup, it becomes one of those situations where you can't see the forest through the trees. You're so close to it that it's hard to see how other people will use it. Yeah. And having that community there means that it becomes a place where you can ask questions to a larger group, and then you get feedback from people who back your idea and like, you know, are excited about your product, and, you know, it just becomes the best thing. I mean, on one side of things, it means that, you know, your customers actually get heard, and like, you know, they can actually give you feedback. But on the other side of things, and this is definitely for us, is like coming up with ideas is difficult. It becomes a thing that, you know, you can be a little bit lazy and like, you know, get other people to come up for ideas for you. And it's like, it's good for them and it's good for you. And, you know, now since we finished the campaign, we have this beautiful community, the TimeChi VIPs group on, ironically, Facebook, but like we're hoping to take it off there at some point, because like, you know, we're all about like, you know, you're taking your breaks and distractions, but like, you know, everything has a time and a place as long as you give it its time and its place. So even like, you know, the things that are distracting, you want to make sure that like, you know, you can still use them. It's just you don't use them, you use them at the right time. But we have our community, which how many people do we have in the community now? Yeah. I'm actually quite curious. We started off like before we started the campaign, we had well over 1,000 members. Yeah, we're almost 2,000 members in the community now, and that's almost the same amount of TimeChis that we have as backers. We have over 2,000 people who are now TimeChi customers, and we have 2,000 people in that group, and it's just it's a beautiful thing to see people converse and share ideas, and not only about your product, but like, you know, how it can be used, and even kind of like the greater above, like, you know, what they want to see, and like how they use their time and stuff like that. So it's just this absolutely fantastic thing, and I think that's our biggest success. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, you know, getting the money is great. Yes. But like, you know, it's only the start of a long journey, and it's like, you know, it's probably, you'll find it's like, it's the greatest thing, because it means after working on something for so long, you can finally eat, but and get your product manufactured. But like at the same time, everything else that you build and everything post Indiegogo is kind of like where your candy is on top.
Yeah. Startups need money. Can't deny it.
Yeah, actually, I think I was having a look through like the question and answer, and there's actually a couple of funny questions, but you know, one of them was talking about where to get money to get your startup off the ground. And yeah, it's true. So like, you know, people like Indiegogo and Arrow can kind of like, you know, help you out by being more capitally efficient. But for us, we had a couple of one high net worth individual who believed in the idea enough to give us a small investment. But most of the things that we did were bootstrapped, because investors are scared of investing in hardware companies. So it kind of helped you de-risk, because if somebody gave us like, hey, we're going to invest $1 million into you and you can still keep a large proportion of your business, maybe we wouldn't have gone crowdfunding. But that's never going to happen, not unless you're like, you know, on your third successful like hardware startup. Right. So most of like what we did came from either government grants, or I was lucky enough that this wasn't my first company and startup, and I had some savings in the background that helped keep the lights on and the water running and everything like that. But also managing to get some great people on the team who believed in TimeChi enough to be able to work on the idea with me, even before being paid like, you know, market salary and the amount of money that it requires to get engineers and developers and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So Sean, what happened now? Like now that the campaign ended, what are your goals, or like what part of the project are you in?
Yeah, we're at the point where in December of last year, just before the world shut down for the pandemic, we already shortlisted and signed off like memorandums of understanding with the people we chose as manufacturers, which was an absolutely fantastic thing. And you know, to this day, I'm like, whoo! Luckily, we did that then while we could still travel about. Yeah. But now that we've gotten all the numbers and everything like that, it means it's down to getting that production underway and making sure that we create something awesome for our customers. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. I think I mentioned offline before we started this one that it's 6:41 a.m. at the moment in Hong Kong, because I am literally sitting in a service apartment in Hong Kong. And 2 days ago on Monday was my first day out of a 14-day mandatory quarantine, where quite literally they gave me a bracelet that tracked me and I couldn't leave the apartment. So that was a little bit fun, a little bit isolating, but it means that I can be close enough to our manufacturers to be able to iterate on the design, make sure that, like, you know, the plastic mold designs are correct, that the fit and finish are correct, that the electronics are fine and they work and they've gotten all the testing regimes and stuff, and still be within 1 day shipping of like where our factories are just over the border in Shenzhen, or Shenzhen, as if you wanted to call it that. But the interesting thing is that the border is still closed at the moment, getting very close to being open. So I'm keeping fingers very tightly crossed so that I can actually sit with my with our manufacturers for the first production run. But even if we didn't need to do that, like, I guess the thing is that you can actually do a lot of things remotely. Just being remote in Sydney, Australia, where I normally am, is taking more than 7 days for an express shipment to come in. So I wanted to make sure that if we did need to iterate and do a couple more design changes and stuff like that, I could afford to be able to get things done faster by just being across the border.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess you were there. Perfect timing.
Yeah, it's so officially we're shipping in January 2021, but you know, being an entrepreneur and being kind of like very impatient with things, like, you know, it's trying to be time efficient. We're trying to see if we can pull that forward because we'd love to get it in people's hands before the end of the year, especially so that we can become part of everybody's kind of like New Year resolution. The amount of people that we talk to where their New Year's resolution is, hey, I want to be more productive this year. We want to be able to be there on, like, you know, so that it's in people's hands before January 1 so that they can start the year right. But, like, you know, it's a more interesting time than ever to get anything done in this modern world.
Yeah. And what's cool about your product is that it's going to be able to help people focus more on creating their products.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially kind of like the base of everyone's focus system.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, you know, meta. It's like, oh, we're using an Indiegogo project to be productive enough to be able to create our own Indiegogo project. I mean, it's one of those things that almost one of I think our biggest market, our bread and butter, we always thought we're going to be engineers and people who hate being interrupted while they're trying to work. But it ends up being a lot of people who are entrepreneurs or startup people who have their own idea and stuff, and, you know, are creating their own business. They become acutely aware of how productive or unproductive they can be. And they probably come to the same realization that I did, where it's like, I need to be more productive because this is money burn that's going on and trying to get things done. And, you know, it becomes, hey, well, actually, we've got a product for that. And it kind of works really well. I mean, it keeps us productive. I mean, it's this kind of circular thing where we use TimeChi to keep productive enough to create TimeChi. And it kind of
I love it. Thank you. I love that answer. Thank you so much. Jeff, I just want to talk a little bit more about joining the Aero certification program, the benefits, the resources around it all. Would you mind just giving us like a brief overview of what the benefits of certification look like?
Sure, yeah. So kind of the biggest benefit, I would say, is kind of being able to talk with engineers. You know, we have a manufacturing team that can assist entrepreneurs. You know, we have obviously lots of partners from Aero that are, you know, manufacturers, along with all of our, you know, manufacturers of components. So that's a huge benefit to any entrepreneur, is to know, you know, all the information about the components that they might not know. Like Sean had mentioned about being obsolete, being end of life. Those are really important that you might not think about at the time when you're designing. And then when it comes to production, you know, it becomes a little bit more tricky, as well as all the supply side. So making sure that, you know, either we have it in stock or we're ordering it in time. That's another big benefit. We also have quite a few other programs. You know, we have a platform that we developed out so that you can, you know, if you have a project that you need some piece of it, you know, an engineering consultant or just a little piece of that project done outside, that's something that we developed out for entrepreneurs. So again, that can help. So there's numerous, you know, benefits to the the certification program. But I would say the biggest one is just kind of Arrow's network and the people at Arrow, because that's really where we can benefit the most with all the expertise. I might not know the answer, but we have thousands of engineers, so I can go ask, somebody down, well, right now it's digital, but typically be right down the hall. So that's, I say, the biggest benefit. People might not think about it, but really that's where you actually save massive amounts of time and money. And I'm sure you can attest to that, Sean.
Absolutely. I think one of the first things we learned is about asking good questions and knowing, probably even stronger, is knowing where to go to get those questions answered. Is like, it's just like literally like startup bread and butter.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, Jeff, that's a great answer. And for all you out there listening in, and you want to join the certification program, you'll have the opportunity to work with Jeff or some of our other engineers. And as a heads up, if you do work with Jeff, he's a big fisherman. So give yourself like an extra 10 minutes just to talk about outdoor activities. But yeah, some of the other benefits, I mean, we talked about it with Sean a little bit, would be like the marketing support. Jeff brought up the manufacturing, supply chain services, all kinds of really great things that we can help like cater to your projects. So if you guys have any questions about that, we would be more than happy to answer those for you. And I think right now is the perfect opportunity to get into some of those questions that you guys have been posting during this fireside chat. So Sean, Jeff, thank you guys for chatting with me. Thank you for your insight, Sean. We really appreciate it. I'm going to pass it over to Brittany now to kind of talk about some of those questions that we have been receiving.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. That was really entertaining. Okay, so going through a couple of these questions, I think one question that we had here for Sean and also for Jeff and Jordan as well, but if you guys had to give like one piece of advice to an entrepreneur that was just starting out, what would it be?
Oh, I know a good one.
Go for it.
It's one of the biggest things is everybody learns differently and can learn and does the way that they learn very differently. I think the biggest thing that you can do is kind of like learning how to learn. Is figure out how to make sure that you can pick up a task and like a skill very quickly in the way that you like to learn and be able to find that out. And learning, the biggest thing that you can learn to do is learn how to learn and learn quickly, because geez, everything's trial by fire when starting a startup. So if you can unlock that key to figure out how to make sure you can pick up a skill in a day or two, then that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give.
I would kind of second that in a way. I think the big one is knowing when something might be out of your expertise too. And if that's the case, knowing, I guess the second two pieces of advice. Second thing would be going to experts in that field and knowing, like you had mentioned before, maybe you don't even know which questions to ask, but if you know the experts, they can lead you down that path and give you a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, it was kind of I was trying to tee up which was the biggest bit of advice, if it was one bit of advice, because the other one that I was fighting against is also learn how to ask good questions.
Yeah. I just beat you to it. I took my two questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when I'm on calls with Jeff, he does a really good job of asking questions that these people wouldn't even know existed. Because a lot of these startups, a lot of people don't have like the back knowledge on electronic components or circuit boards, anything like that. So being open to like learn and take in new information and know that things will change. Like you're going to come in with an idea, your first draft, second draft, third draft, and know that it's not going to stay like that. 9 out of 10 times there's little pieces here and there that will be altered or will be changed just by other people's recommendations and suggestions. So just being up for that change. Obviously we're all here to make your guys' project super successful. We want to see you guys succeed in the long run. So I would say that would be my advice to you, is just to be open for change and adapt.
Awesome. All right, Sean, we've got a couple of questions here about the TimeChi product itself.
Yep.
So there's one that says, do you need to identify what tasks you're undertaking when you're setting up the device? And then also another product question is, are there any security concerns regards to the like connectivity side of things?
Oh yeah, the first one is no, you don't need to set them up ahead of time. For me, it's something that I like to do is create lists about like what I'm going to work on throughout the day. It becomes very good when you're doing that just as a general rule, but if you kind of like tend to work on things ad hoc, then even just trying to get into time boxing where you go and spend, hey, I'm going to do one task or just keep focused for like 25 minutes or whatever time you select, it also shows a lot of improvement. But what we're actually working on in the background is in our software being able to create the task list that you want to do and assign different tasks to your time periods so that it becomes almost like a personal reporting tool for your own productivity. It's kind of like, imagine, like I keep on using the Fitbit kind of analogy, but it's like, you know, if you did an hour of biking and then an hour of running and like, you know, the amount of walking, it's like looking back at that one, it makes you feel a lot better, kind of like knowing what you did during that time. But no, getting the list in on it before you start everything is not necessary, but I would highly suggest it. Is security a concern? Yes, security is constantly a concern. In fact, the partner of my co-founder is actually the managing director of a company called Bug Crowd, which does bug bounties. And we always joke that if we mess up on the security side of things, my co-founder is never going to hear the end of it. So we make sure that, you know, there is a security, like it's kind of like first and foremost on our side of things. When it comes to making sure that everything works on our cloud platform, we made sure that the IoT device is encrypted on both sides so that everything between the device and us is not modified, isn't changed. We make sure that, you know, like we have a very much a security first aspect of like trying to make sure that, like, you know, we don't become a device that ends up becoming part of a botnet, which sometimes happens by keeping generic passwords on things. We have almost like our own virtual private cloud, which all of our devices kind of reside in, to make sure that you know, we keep our ecosystem very tightly guarded when it comes to security, because the last thing we want to do, especially if we're going to be a product in businesses, is have something that could potentially leak out or become a security risk. So security is one of those things that we have right at the front of our mind, and we're like, you know, making every single attempt to make sure that we don't get things wrong. But at the end of the day, it's like, even if we do, we are software updatable from day one. So it means that we can always constantly upgrade and make sure that, like, you know, if there are any flaws, we can patch them as quickly as possible.
Awesome. Awesome. Question for Jeff. There's a question here from an entrepreneur that has kind of more focused on the Aero certification program itself. They have an app, but not an actual piece of hardware, and they're wondering if that qualifies for something that you guys would work with at Aero.
Yeah, so we do software. So that is one of our, I guess, one of the realms that we deal in. So,
Perfect.
you know, if they sign up, we can start discussing and get as much help their way as possible.
Awesome. Awesome. And then Sean, there's a couple of questions here about your experience, like how you found your manufacturer, if you hired an industrial firm when you first got started, how the travel back and forth to Asia was to try and figure out who your manufacturer is. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. Oh, I just realized, I think it's actually your CTO who asked one of the questions, Tony Ogg. Hi, Tony. I had the good opportunity to meet him when he was in Australia last year for a startup conference where he was announcing a partnership with an Australian company here. So I guess, I'll start off with the industrial design firm. No, we didn't get an industrial design firm on top. I, in the early days, learned how to use Fusion 360 and started doing like the basic designs on my own. When I realized that there was a kind of like mechanical part inside it, which had a nice satisfying click, and the realization that this is going to sit on everybody's desk, we actually hired an industrial designer to kind of like, you know, turn concept into something that was producible. And that person had worked in the company and helped us like get to the final design. Traveling to Asia, you need to learn a lot of things about the way that business is done in Asia. I kind of have a huge advantage, the fact that I grew up in Hong Kong, which is part of the reason why I was actually allowed here during the pandemic. It's, if you haven't been to China, haven't visited factories and stuff like that, have many chats and talk to people about, like, you know, how it is to do business in China, because a lot of it is about doing lunches, about like meeting people, about like, you know, actually sitting down and working with them. They're less likely to kind of like, you know, consider you a high relevance business unless they've actually met you, is probably one of the big things. I know that's harder to do now, but I guess like nowadays there's almost quarantine in every single direction that you go in, which is more difficult. But some of the manufacturers that we chose are people that we were either introduced to through third parties or people that we've worked with in smaller batches in the past. We found some of our manufacturers for things like boxes and stuff using sourcing websites like Alibaba and things like that, which did help a lot, like especially if we're looking for things like just like soft bags that we're putting in, or the cardboard boxes that they go in. That's an amazing like thing to do. But yeah, a couple of pieces of advice: if you're going to go into China, don't expect that everybody speaks English. It's nice that they have salespeople who typically speak English, but it's good to kind of like find out how to get a translator and stuff like that, so that, you know, there's even people who just speak Chinese, it's not the easiest thing to get them to communicate with your manufacturers, because there's a lot of technical terms which you do need to know. And it's like, you know, you need to find a translator who can help you do that. I think that covered most of the questions. Was there one that I missed, Brittany?
No, I think you got it. Thank you. Another question that we had here was on your Indiegogo campaign page itself. Someone's asking, did you do all of that yourself, like in-house, or did you use an outside consultant to help you kind of set up your crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, this goes to something that Jeff was saying earlier. It's like, if you're not an expert in something, kind of like know your limits, I guess is the long and short of it. We actually did get an external, there's an external firm to help us with running the actual campaign itself. So we got a great company called Russell Marketing that we actually got introduced to through the Indiegogo team. They helped us do the design for the page. They helped us, like, you know, run the ads and stuff like that, because, oh my gosh, like running Facebook ads it's an art form in itself, and that's not where like our expertise is. So we actually brought them on to help us out. So highly recommend. They show a lot of love for each one of their clients and each one of their customers. So it's like, if I mean, I've actually seen another project which another friend did, and they kind of like did the website and everything themselves. The tools are available to you. Like, you know, there's a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get editor on the Indiegogo website to be able to do it. But you know, there's no shortage of people who can help you put together a good page and even help you run a good campaign.
Awesome. Well, we're just about at time, so I'll go ahead and start wrapping up. Thank you so much, Sean, Jeff, and Jordan, for your time today. This was super entertaining and educational, I think, for everybody. For all of our attendees, if you are interested in learning more about TimeChi, head over to Indiegogo.com and search for TimeChi. They're currently in demand, so you can back their campaign now. If you're interested in joining the Arrow certification program, if you want to talk to Jeff or Jordan, go to enterprise.indiegogo.com/arrow, fill out the quick little form, and I will also include both of those links in our follow-up email later today or tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks again, you guys. Thanks, Sean, for waking up so early for us. This was a great conversation. And thanks everyone for attending virtual Hangouts.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Later,
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye, you guys.
Thanks very much.
Everyone. See you next time. Bye.
See ya.